is leaving no one behind, and that goes with the Sustainable Development Goal number 6, which talks about water for all by 2030. To talk a little bit further about that, I'm now joined via Skype by Professor Mike Muller from the Wits School of Governance. Thanks so much for joining us. Welcome to the program. World Water Day, an important day, but sadly not a lot of us pay attention to it, and yet it affects us all.
I think it's always useful to have a point in the year where we focus on water. Unfortunately, though, as you say, there's lots of people who might want to raise water problems who don't get heard. And the real water crisis in South Africa is exactly those people left behind, the 3 million people who don't have any access to safe water, the 14 million who don't have any access to safe sanitation, which also affects our water quality. And then a very frightening almost 20 million people who have safe water supplies. They've got the infrastructure there, but increasingly it's not working. It's not reliable. They can't go to the tap in the morning and open it and be sure to get water. And that is a real crisis. We are leaving more and more people behind rather than bringing them on board.
All right, let's separate the two issues because there's some of those that are man-made problems. Let's talk about nature, where we sit. We notice, for example, the Western Cape doesn't have much rain, whereas other parts of the country do. So how much does nature play its role in our water situation?
Well, you know, all of our water comes out of a big water cycle, a hydrological cycle. Water evaporates from the sea and rivers and land and lakes. It goes up into the sky. It comes down again as rain, runs into the rivers, and we use a little bit of it and then let it go back into the cycle. That natural cycle continues. We can try and tinker with it in particular little locations like the one you were just illustrating in the Western Cape, and that's important to kind of keep our rivers clean and look after them. But the big natural cycle on which we depend really goes beyond what human beings can influence, and even with climate change, we'll see some changes, but hopefully not very much in that big water cycle. So nature has its way of looking after us. What we must never do is take nature for granted. And I'm afraid that's what Cape Town did when they decided not to supply themselves with more water because they said, oh, well, we think we've got enough and we'll be very careful as to how we use it. But in the end, they found that nature played a terrible trick on them. Just when they were most vulnerable, when they had very limited supplies, it sent along a predictable but very serious drought. And that's what caused the crisis in the Cape. So we must never take nature for granted. We must try and understand it. We must work with it. And if we do that, we might find that we then have a reliable water source. Then we come back to the second problem. How do we get that water that nature makes available to us? How do we get it to the people who need it?
Well, let's talk a little bit about that then. Are we doing a good job? How are we doing in terms of getting that water to where it's needed in the way that it's needed?
Well, I'm afraid, and this is, not controversial. We've heard it from the, from Parliament, from the Auditor General, from a range of reports. And as I said, the reliability of our water supplies to people is falling in many places. Port Elizabeth, Nelson Mandela Bay recently had a water crisis. It wasn't a shortage of water. There was plenty of water available in the Orange River. They had to build a 40-kilometer pipeline and build a treatment works to put the water into the system. Cape Town also, we've identified sources that could supply them with water for the next 15 years, but they chose not to do them on time. If we look at the big cities of Gauteng, Joburg, Tshwane, Ekurhuleni, we are now at the limit of what the Vaal River system can provide to us for the next 6 years until the Lesotho Highlands Phase 2 project comes on board. And because our population is growing, that means that every year in Gauteng, people must use 2 or 3% less water every year. So we've got to cut our water use in Gauteng by 20% over the next 6 years. And I'm afraid that we're not doing enough to meet these challenges. They're not water challenges, they're management challenges and governance challenges, principally.
And also the water leaks. Again, we lose billions of liters of water literally just from our infrastructure.
Indeed, and that's exactly part of the process. And just to give you an example of the kind of management problems we have, and I say we because I worked in the sector for a long time, we set up a system to monitor water leaks right across the country. They used to be reported in various monitoring reports by the department, the blue drop, the green drop, the no drop, which was the leak report. And it became quite embarrassing for the government. But instead of doing something about the leaks, which they should be embarrassed about, they stopped publishing the blue drop and the blue drop and the no drop reports. So now we have to rely on other sources, and government is spared the embarrassment, but we're not spared the water shortage. And this is just an example. Now, Minister Gugs Nkwinti, who's took over a year and a half ago, is trying to put right the damage that was done over the past 5-10 years. And he has promised that he will, for instance, reinstate these monitoring reports so towns and cities and households and industries can see what we're doing and how well or how badly we're doing. But it takes time. We had a system. It was broken. It was taken away. And that's a very sad story, because water is a complicated resource to manage, and you have to build up your system. What we don't need is people who go and break down the system, whether it's at household level, at municipal level, or at national level.
All right, Prof. Muller, we're going to have to leave it there, unfortunately. Thanks so much indeed for sharing your thoughts with us on this very important day, World Water Day. Thanks for your time.
Thanks for drawing our attention to it. It's always helpful. Thank you.
All right, so that was Mike Muller talking to us about World Water Day today and the crisis situation that we're in here in South Africa. World Water Day today being celebrated all over the world, and the theme this year is leaving no one behind. So you heard the situation in South Africa, and the question that we have for you today is what do you think needs to be done to address the water crisis in South Africa? Send us your messages, and remember that our Twitter address at SAtoday_SABC, and also you can send your voice notes to our WhatsApp line, and the number is 081 7328 421.